And good morning and welcome to this, the 10th day of May 2022. And hey, it is 19 degrees and cloudy, and yes, you can feel the chill in the wind. Well, yesterday it got down to 17 degrees. That was quite low. Well, today we have for you, in the first part, we have the daily news, and then we'll go to our daily India report, and then we'll be finishing off with the Parliament sitting, which is happening today. At 9:30. So, quite an interesting segment for today. First of all, let's get this on the road with the face-off with Albanese and Morrison. Let's take a look at that.
Normal programming resumed on the election trail today. The Prime Minister was promoting defence spending.
So we're going to take this for a flight.
Hi, this is Tanya. Hello. Anthony.
Anthony Albanese was spruiking education.
And what are you doing this morning?
But it was hard to avoid the subject of a leaders' debate, which has somehow come to represent the immensely frustrating and strange election campaign we are having in 2022.
It was a pretty spirited debate. I'm sure everybody will agree. These are passionate topics. This is a big choice.
Scott Morrison didn't have anything to say except shouting. He only had smears and that smirk throughout it all.
To sum up where we stand as we enter the last 2 weeks of the election campaign and as pre-polling begins, major opinion polls published last night show Labor holding a huge and notably growing election-winning lead over the coalition. Compared with where the party stood at the same point in the 2019 election, when people on both sides of politics and pundits thought a Labor victory was a certainty, it is in a much stronger position now. But most people in politics can't quite tally what such information tells them and what they are seeing with their own eyes. And it seems a considerable number of undecided voters are facing the same quandary. Focus group pollsters say the main takeout from swinging voters is that they just don't know what to believe either, which made last night's leaders' debate more important. The lead-in to what the Nine network promoted as the Great Debate was Lego Masters, and some of the judging criteria seemed opposite.
It's crazy, it's imaginative, but unfortunately the way you've built it, I can't see it.
2 minutes is all now, everyone, 2 minutes.
If there was something crazy and imaginative to see in the political competition, if there was a story to tell, it wasn't obvious.
That's not right.
No, it is.
That is not right.
That's how it works.
It does not work that way.
The debate turned into an unedifying exercise, which would have done little to improve the impression of either leader or given undecided voters much information about what they both stood for, beyond platitudes.
This is a choice. It's a choice between strength and weakness. It's a choice between certainty and uncertainty.
The truth is we can't afford just 3 more years of the same. 3 more years of drift and neglect. 3 more years of not accepting responsibility.
To disengaged voters, there would have been a lot of talk that wouldn't have made much sense.
The Reserve Bank Governor himself has said that what has been driving their decision to take rates from 0.1%, and let's recall, in the United Kingdom, they're up at 1%. They've gone up 90 basis points.
Our investments have been in areas which will grow productivity, which will grow the economy in a way that doesn't put pressure on inflation. Take, for example, childcare.
There were statements that wouldn't withstand much fact-checking.
The way we've been able to address this issue is making sure we manage money wisely. We've turned the budget around by over $100 billion in the last year.
In fact, the $100 billion improvement in the budget bottom line is a payoff for the billions of dollars the government spent during the pandemic continuing to boost the economy, not because it has been managing money parsimoniously. In fact, it made new spending commitments of around $75 billion between last year's budget and this year's. And there were statements which, at this point, are more good intent than guarantees.
Real wages will rise under Labor. Is that what you're promising?
Our objective is to have our objective is to have real wage increases, and we have practical plans to do that.
In other words, it is a noble ambition. The opposition leader had difficulty articulating how a government he led would actually achieve it. And in such circumstances, those undecided voters would have been making decisions based on not much more than reading body language. Last night's debate was part of what has become a regular, unseemly tussle at election time over debates between leaders. The political parties game the system to maximise their advantage. The television networks compete furiously to host these events.
And that's why this election...
Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese have so far met head-to-head in a town hall debate on Sky, where they are asked questions by voters, and last night's 9 debate. There will be another debate on the 7 network on Wednesday night, moderated by political editor Mark Riley, but showing late, at 9:10, after the season premiere of Big Brother. The decisions about debates in this election have been largely dictated by the Prime Minister's office and the Liberal Party. Invitations to debate on the ABC and at the National Press Club have been declined. While this has provoked questions in some quarters, the pragmatic reality is that politics is increasingly becoming an exercise in narrowcasting to particular audiences. Which makes it all the more perplexing that the Prime Minister spent time over the weekend talking about religious discrimination and sexual discrimination, not front-of-mind issues for many voters, but ones that can potentially bury some of his moderate MPs.
What makes you think this attempt will be any different?
Well, I'm quite determined. I think people have learnt that about me.
Pollsters report a voter quandary. The government's message that it has got the country through an unprecedented period of upheaval holds weight against what is still regarded as a largely undefined policy platform from Labor compared to the bold positions that have won at government in the past. But then there is Scott Morrison. There is a rump of people, pollsters say, who have made up their minds against him and they are not for changing. Anthony Albanese has become more relatable, but the focus groups still have trouble describing him. As of today, people are starting to cast their votes. If it is true that 1/4 of voters are still undecided, the battle to win them over in these last desperate days before May 21 will only become more intense.
Intense it will be, and as we know, pre-polling has begun and people are already making their way to avoid the big rush on the final day. Well, right now, as was said, that some people are still undecided, and so we will have to just wait and see what happens out there. Well, of course, with all these elections and everything, with number of people out and about now, what is happening with the COVID-19 situation?
Long physical queues and long lines online as well. With 70% of the more than 10,000 new COVID cases recorded through rapid antigen tests, the Health Minister wasn't surprised the website used to register results temporarily couldn't cope.
In some ways, it's a good thing that so many people are using RATs and trying to lodge them. I understand that issue is resolved.
WA Health acknowledged high demand had placed the system under strain and asked people to queue online or try again later. As well as a daily record for WA, the state also reported the highest number of cases in the country. 279 West Australians are in hospital with the virus, including 6 in intensive care. No new deaths were recorded. But the government insists the high daily numbers aren't necessarily cause for concern.
The numbers we're watching is the ICU and the hospitalisations, and our ICU numbers have remained remarkably flat throughout this entire experience.
Since the government dropped the indoor mask mandate a little under 2 weeks ago, case numbers and hospitalisations have steadily risen, prompting some to again question the decision to relax restrictions.
There's no doubt that keeping the indoor mask mandate would have slowed down the infection rate.
We do ask people to just be sensible and exercise common sense.
In the meantime, the state government has expanded its free RAT program with 70 new locations in regional WA now open, from which close contacts can collect up to 30 tests for their household. Samia O'Keefe, ABC News.
And we have plenty more to talk about, but what we'll do, because we will be joining the Queensland Parliament live coverage at 9:30. Right now, let's go to our daily India report, and we'll fill in with any of the news before we connect to the Parliament.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and much more on India and the Indian diaspora. The cyclonic storm on India's east coast intensified into a severe one and moves towards the North Andhra and Odisha coasts. Cyclone Asani intensified into a severe cyclonic storm at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time on 8th May over southeast Bay of Bengal, about 610 kilometers northwest of Car Nicobar Islands. Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and West Bengal states were put on alert. Under the cyclone's influence, Coastal areas are expected to experience heavy winds and rains from the evening of May 10th, according to the Indian Meteorological Department Director General Mrityunjay Mohapatra. He said the system will not make landfall in Odisha or Andhra Pradesh, but light to moderate rainfall at a few places, with heavy one at isolated places is likely over coastal Odisha and adjoining coastal areas of North Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal on May 11. On reaching West Central and adjoining Northwest Bay of Bengal off North Andhra Pradesh Odisha coast on May 10th, the cyclone is very likely to move north-northeastwards and towards the Northwest Bay of Bengal of Odisha coast, the IMD said. The severe cyclonic storm is very likely to lose some steam thereafter and turn into a simple storm on May 11th and later into a deep depression on May 12th, the IMD said in its forecast of Asani's track and intensity. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on May 7 chaired a high-level meeting to review the implementation of the National Education Policy, NEP. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on May 7 chaired a high-level meeting to review the implementation of National Education Policy. He advocated developing a hybrid system of online and offline learning to avoid overexposure to the technology in school-going children. Prime Minister said that the implementation of NEP 2020 in the 2 years since its launch saw many initiatives in achieving the objectives of access, equity, inclusivity and quality according to an official statement. At the meeting, the Prime Minister was told that the work on formulating a national curriculum framework under the guidance of the National Steering Committee was in progress. Praising the new education policy, Modi said that from special efforts to track out-of-school children and bring them back into the mainstream for the introduction of multiple entries and exit points in the higher education, many transformative reforms have been initiated to define and lead the progress of the country as it enters the Amrit Kal.
On Saturday, Honorable Prime Minister chaired a high-level meeting to monitor the implementation of New Education Policy 2020. While discussing, he mentioned some very important points. One, that the education today has to integrate with the technology, and all teaching and learning processes right from the schools should be in hybrid mode. Online classes and offline classes, both should be promoted so that neither the students are exposed to technology too much, nor the teachers, the wisdom what they get from the teachers, from the environment, that should be missed by the students. The Honorable Prime Minister, through these initiatives, want to achieve accessibility, equity, inclusivity, and quality of education in the country.
As Jet Airways plans to fly again, it received the necessary security clearance from the Government of India. India's Home Ministry has granted security clearance to Jet Airways, which is planning to relaunch commercial flight operations in the next few months, according to an official document. The Jalan Kalrock Consortium is currently the promoter of Jet Airways. The airline in its old avatar was owned by Naresh Goyal and had operated its last flight on April 17, 2019. The airline recently conducted its test flight to and from the Hyderabad airport in for obtaining the air operator certificate. The test flight was conducted to prove to the aviation regulator DGCA that the aircraft and its components are operating normally. The iconic Himalayan Badrinath Shrine opens for devotees amid cheers as most COVID curbs are removed. The iconic Badrinath temple in the Himalayan state of Uttarakhand saw a grand opening for devotees on May 8th morning with rituals amid cheers. A huge crowd awaited the moment to enter the shrine. This is the first time in 2 years that the devotees were able to offer prayers without COVID restrictions. In a video, several devotees are seen standing at the door and raising Vedic chants. In another video, a group of women can be seen dancing to their own tunes and chanting Vedic mantras. While a few curbs have been waived off, the state government has set a daily pilgrim limit at 15,000. Meanwhile, the famous Char Dham Yatra or the Four Shrines pilgrimage also commenced on May 3rd after almost 2 years without any COVID-19 restrictions. Unlike last year, the government has not mandated carrying a negative COVID test report or a vaccination certificate. The yatra began with the opening of Gangotri and Yamunotri portals for devotees on the occasion of Akshay Tritiya in the presence of Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami. The Indian Army performs a daring rescue of the two youngsters stuck in Jammu and Kashmir's Chenab River. Here's the video. The Indian Army carried out a daring rescue operation and saved two lives who were trapped in the middle of the fast-flowing Chenab River in the Kishtwar district of Jammu and Kashmir territory. In the video, soldiers can be seen rappelling across the river to rescue the two youths. On May 7 evening, Sunil and Bablu were crossing Chenab in a JCB earth mover were trapped in the river. The duo had to sit on the roof of the vehicle and wait to be rescued. Officials said that the fast flow of the river had posed difficulty in the rescue operation, with two army personnel eventually making a daring attempt to cross the river while using a rope tied for the alignment of the bridge. The two were finally rescued in the pitch dark of the night. In the visuals, the two youths can be seen sitting atop a partially submerged JCB while a huge crowd gathered on the banks of the river. On the occasion of Mother's Day, celebrities shared pictures on social media. Let's take a look. Social media on May 8th was flooded with the heartwarming tributes to mothers. B-Town celebs also took to social media to shower love on their mothers. Alia Bhatt posted an unseen picture from her and Ranbir Kapoor's wedding reception with their two moms, Soni Rastan and Neetu Kapoor. Kareena Kapoor Khan treated her fans with a cute picture with her sons Taimur Ali Khan and Jay Ali Khan on the occasion of Mother's Day. Katrina Kaif shared an adorable photo with her mother Suzanne Turcotte and wrote Mother's Day. Neha Dhupia, who's a supermom to her two kids Meher and Gurik Singh, shared a few unseen pictures that capture the joy of her motherhood. Janhvi Kapoor missed her late mother Sridevi on Mother's Day. She shared an unseen childhood photo where she is seen in the arms of the late actress. Sensex declined more than 800 points while Nifty slipped below 16,200 after falling 250 points on May 9th as the rupee hits record low. The equity markets fell sharply on 9th May morning, tracking negative global cues. While the 30-share BSE Sensex declined more than 800 points to trade below 54,000 at 9:30 am, the NSE Nifty slipped below 16,200 after falling 250 points following a sell-off in global markets and a decline in shares of index major Reliance Industries. What hit the sentiment most was a fall in rupee to an all-time low against the greenback, thanks to the rising US Treasury yields amid fears of an aggressive rate hike by the US Federal Reserve in the June FOMC meet. Axis Bank, Tata Steel, Tech Mahindra, Maruti, Bajaj Twins, Reliance, HDFC Twins, ICICI Bank and M&M were the top Sensex losers, down up to 4%. Hindalco, JSW Steel and Tata Motors were the additional losers on the Nifty. Power Grid, UPL and Cipla meanwhile were the only gainers on the benchmarks, up 1%. Sectorally, all indices opened with steep losses. Nifty Metals, IT, PSPs, Energy slipped the most, up to 2%. Nifty Banks, Auto, Financials were also notable losers. Bollywood star Sanjay Dutt celebrates 41 years in the Indian cinema industry. He took to Instagram and Twitter to thank all his fans. Star Sanjay Dutt made his Bollywood debut as a lead in 1981 with Rocky. The film, which was released on May 8th, was a stepping stone in Sanjay's career. The movie was Sanjay's first as a lead in the film industry. While playing Adhira in his latest Yash starrer KGF Chapter 2, Sanjay completed his 41-year career. With many
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for the Daily India News, and thank you, Anubati, for that. And right now, as we know, at 9:30, we are going to the Parliament House live. So we'll bring you the live coverage from Queensland Parliament House sitting day today after the break. So we will see what are the topics being discussed there today. But before we go to that, here's a few of the clips that we'd like to share with you before we join in with the Parliament very, very soon. So, as we know about that money laundering, not small, big time things, what happens there is after that investigation, there's further executives who are now resigning from Sydney Star Casino.
The things that have come to pass is astounding in both the breadth and depth of the actions. The casino executives have dropped a lot of safeguards in the pursuit of the almighty dollar.
One by one, for almost 2 months, staff from Australia's second largest casino operator have sat in the virtual witness box.
Mr. Beckier, could you please tell the review your full name?
My name is Matthias Michael Beckier.
Matt Beckier was, until recently, the chief executive of the Star Entertainment Group.
With the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Much of the inquiry's focus has been on alleged money laundering in this small room known as Salon 95. It was reserved for big money foreign gamblers. They were enticed to Sydney by a notorious...
The bell is sounding for the Parliament, and as soon as they come live, we will join there and leave the news.
...foreign gambling tour operator known as the Sun City Junket.
Did anyone make you aware that on multiple occasions, Sun City representatives had been seen taking large bags of cash into the Sun City enclosed office area?
I took this as a one-off event. I was not aware of reoccurrences.
They're raising a very serious prospect that money laundering is occurring in Salon 95. Do you agree?
Yes, Ms. Sharp.
This alleged transformation of criminal cash into legitimate funds was happening in full view of the Star's security cameras, along with participants seemingly exchanging chips for cash with the junket operator and not with the Star itself, a practice in the industry known as operating a cage.
And your position is you had no idea that this was going on?
Yes, that's my position.
If the executives wanted to make sure that the junkets do not operate any private cages, they should have enforced that.
Ben Lee is a casino industry analyst and he's been closely tracking the Star inquiry.
It's most likely a case of turning a blind eye towards what was happening in the junket room in the pursuit of the dollar.
The former CEO was also grilled about the use of Chinese debit cards to pay for up to almost $1 billion worth of gaming chips, despite the Chinese card issuer banning gambling. The Star misled banks about the practice, the inquiry has been told, and it did not receive approval from the New South Wales casino regulator.
We agreed to engage in this process back in 2013 because everybody else was doing it, even though we probably knew that it was a very sharp practice. We accepted something that we knew was probably wrong from the very beginning.
And does it follow that you were very much a party to what you described as a sharp practice?
I let that happen, yes.
The former CEO says staff failed to keep him informed about matters that he's only now learning about at this inquiry.
I had total confidence in my team, and I have learned a lot of things that are contrary to what I have been told.
Do you feel let down by your team?
Some people, yes.
I find it difficult to accept that the management team under him would have colluded to basically keep the CEO in the dark.
There's two options. He's either culpable, that is to say he knows what's going on and he doesn't care about it, or he's so lacking in curiosity as to be completely inappropriate for that job.
After the former chief executive's evidence, the Star announced 3 of its most senior staff members were resigning. The chief financial officer, Harry Theodore, is going, along with the New South Wales casino boss, Greg Hawkins, and the chief legal officer, Paula Martin.
I would expect that if the company is to survive, then The senior management team, at least, is going to have to be changed, and most of the board, if not all of the board, will have to be renewed. So, that's almost certainly what's likely to happen over the coming months.
I've sat in briefings from the Star's lawyers.
Today, the first Star board member fronted the inquiry. More will follow this week, including the chairman, former CEO of Australian Rugby Union and the Football Federation of Australia, John O'Neill.
This is a problem for which the board as a whole must accept responsibility, not just yourself personally. You agree?
I don't think the board had any visibility of this. If I didn't see those problems, I'm not sure the board could have seen them.
If it's happening at Crown and happening at Star, it's almost certainly happening at other casinos. Anywhere there is a casino operating in Australia, there is the opportunity for money to be laundered and for vulnerable people to be exploited.
So there you are, that's that report, and the bell is now ringing in the Queensland Parliament, and it will soon be the time to join in there. But right now, let's take a look at what's happening with Jetstar.
Canberra to Melbourne or the Gold Coast for less than $60. That's the new dual offering from budget airline Jetstar as the capital brand moves beyond business and politics.
One of the challenges for us has been that it's often been cheaper to fly to Bali or to other parts of Australia than it has been to fly into Canberra. So this is a game changer for us.
That perception that Canberra's an expensive destination really makes a big difference to sort of going against that.
The announcement of flights to Melbourne from July 1st and the Gold Coast 2 months later comes after Jetstar's successful launch in Canberra last year.
Over 80% of the seats sold, in some instances flights sold out weeks in advance.
And while there's still some hesitancy over international trips since lockdowns ended, demand for domestic travel is growing.
The airlines are now reporting that the passenger volumes, particularly over the Easter period, are at or indeed in some cases were exceeding that of pre-pandemic levels.
International travel is still on the ACT government's radar.
It's a bigger decision for an international airline to come back into Australia and to come back into to our market. So we continue to engage with Qatar, with Singapore Airlines, with Air New Zealand.
The airport mask mandate remains in place for now, which Canberra Airport CEO says makes no sense.
If you can be in a nightclub for 4 or 5 hours and dance till 3 in the morning and drink and stand up and none of that needs a mask, then surely sitting quietly in an airport lounge cannot be more dangerous than that.
I would anticipate it being on the agenda of the...
Right now, we'll go and join the Queensland Parliament.
Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Honourable members, I respectfully acknowledge that we are sitting today on the land of Aboriginal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. I thank them as first Australians for their careful custodianship of the land over countless generations. We are indeed fortunate in this country to have two of the world's oldest continuing living cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, whose lands, winds and waters we all now share. Honourable members, I have to report that I've received from Her Excellency the Governor a letter in respect of assent to certain bills. The contents of the letter will be incorporated in the record of proceedings. I table the letter for the information of members. Are there any matters of privilege? Honourable members, on the 6th of April 2022 I tabled 3 rulings regarding matters of privilege. A ruling relating to a complaint by the Minister for Transport and Main Roads alleging that the member for Maroochydore deliberately misled the House during matters of public interest on the 22nd of February 2022. A ruling relating to a complaint by the member for Burnett alleging that the Deputy Premier deliberately misled the House in response to a question on notice on the 17th of August 2021. A ruling relating to complaints by the Minister for Health and Ambulance Services that the Leader of the Opposition and members for Toowoomba South and Mudgeeraba, Burnett, Glasshouse and Whitsunday deliberately misled the House on the 30th of November 2021. Honourable members, I ruled that all three matters did not warrant the further attention of the House via the Ethics Committee. I now refer to all three matters so that if any member wishes to exercise their rights in respect of those matters under standing orders, they should do so immediately, identifying the matter. Honourable members, I note the information for the House that under Standing Order 67, the Minister for the Environment and the Great Barrier Reef and Minister for Science and Youth Affairs provided the Clerk with an alteration of the notice of motion given on the 30th of March relating to the revocation and dedication of certain areas. The amended notice of motion does not exceed the scope of the original notice of motion and simply inserts a heading which provides clarification relating to the areas to be dedicated as national parks. The alteration of the notice of motion does not impact the timing of legislative requirements under the Nature Conservation Act 1992 relating to the revocations in the notice and does not therefore reset the notice period under that Act. Honourable members, I've received advice from the Minister for Resources and Member for Townsville, the Honourable Scott Stewart MP, and also advice from the Member for Hill, Shane Knuth MP, as to their absence from sittings of the House this week. The members' notifications comply with Standing Order 263A. Honourable members, in line with the general easing of COVID-19 restrictions, I advise that members are no longer required to sit only in their allocated seat during the sittings. It's good to have good news. Honourable members, I wish to advise that we will be visited in the gallery this morning by students and teachers from student leaders from Bray Park State School in the electorate of Pine Rivers, student leaders from the Aboriginal and Islander Independent Community School, the Murray School, in the electorate of Algester, Somerville House in the electorate of South Brisbane, and Ormeau Woods State High School in the electorate of Coomera. Are there any appointments to be announced? Will the Clerk read the list of petitions lodged?
The following honourable member has lodged an e-petitions which are now closed and presented. Dr Rowan from 544 petitioners requesting the House to implement a system of mandatory accreditation and annual training in CPR for all residential properties where there is a pool. Mr Andrew from 6,780 petitioners requesting the House to hold a full inquiry into the use of lobbyists. Mr Andrew from 16,745 petitioners requesting the House to remove mandatory vaccinations and vax passports in government departments and for Queensland residents. The following lodged petitions sponsored by the Clerk are now closed and presented. 1,344 petitioners requesting the House to amend legislation for youth and adult offenders granted bail or parole in Queensland, which makes it mandatory for offenders charged with serious criminal offences to be fitted with a GPS monitoring device. 634 petitioners requesting the House to reopen the recently closed Rockhampton Marie Stopes Women Health Clinic. 1,278 petitioners requesting the House to instigate a full and transparent evaluation of the urinary tract infection pharmacy pilot project prior to any continuation or expansion of the program. 306 petitioners requesting the House to make safety a priority by working with local governments to identify and eliminate level crossings on the South East Queensland network. 342 petitioners requesting the House to increase the resources to the Petitions Office. 1,059 petitioners requesting the House to amend the provisions of the Animal Care and Protection Act 2001 that permit prolonged unsupervised confinement and or tethering of a dog. 1,007 petitioners requesting the House to ensure legislation includes mandatory codes for provision of species-specific shelter and consider each species' capacity to tolerate extremes in weather. 1,840 petitioners requesting the House to stop the mountain bike development proposal and declare Redwood Park a national park.
Notifications and tabling.
I inform the House of the tabling of certain papers in accordance with the notification and tabling of papers document emailed to members.
Are there any ministerial papers? Are there any ministerial notices of motion? Are there any ministerial statements? I call the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, only 2 months after intense rainfall brought havoc across South East Queensland, again I rise to warn Queenslanders to prepare for damaging weather this week. Already we've seen how dangerous this event can be. I can confirm that a man was rescued from floodwaters in Mount Isa late last night after he was spotted in the river. Mr Speaker, I offer my heartfelt thanks to the police officers and Swiftwater Rescue firefighters who risked their lives to save this man. I understand he's being treated for hypothermia at hospital and I wish him a speedy recovery. In the 21 hours to 6 a.m, we've seen heavy rainfall in some parts of the south-east, far north and central Queensland, including 97 millimetres at Kirby, northwest of Winton, 79 millimetres at Coops Corner near Rainbow Beach and 59 millimetres at Daintree Village. And since 3 p.m. yesterday, the SES has received 39 requests for assistance. Mr Speaker, the Bureau of Meteorology has warned us to expect significant rain across much of Queensland this week. We're likely to see showers and thunderstorms transition to widespread rainfall over the next few days. And the Bureau has advised some locations may receive their highest May rainfall on record this week. Forecasts show that almost all of Queensland will be impacted by rain throughout the week, with the heaviest falls likely across the central and northern interior today before spreading towards coastal areas from Wednesday. Localised flash flooding is an increased risk this week, particularly in creeks, streams or falls that are already saturated. There is a potential for bands of intense rainfall over the next few days, particularly around coastal areas between Ingham and Yeppoon on Wednesday. And I'm advised that this could lead to dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding. Flood watches are current for numerous catchments across northern, central and western Queensland. South, east and remaining central Queensland catchments will be assessed today. Current warnings in place are a major flood warning for the Cooper Creek, a moderate flood warning for Eyre Creek, minor flood warnings for the Thompson, Barcoo and Georgina rivers and a flood warning for the Diamantina River. Mr Speaker, we know that these events can develop quickly. I can assure Queenslanders that our emergency services are prepared and our councils are prepared. The SES is also mobilising volunteers throughout the state and Swiftwater rescue crews are on standby to attend to any emerging threats. But they can't do it on their own, so I urge Queenslanders today to visit the Get Ready Queensland site to ensure you're prepared for severe weather. Monitor the weather updates. There'll be a lot of broadcasts that the Bureau has already started putting out, so I urge Queenslanders to listen to that. And most importantly, if it's flooded, forget it. Yeah. Mr Speaker, last week senior members of the International Olympic Committee toured venues for the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games across the south-east. Mr Speaker, it's fair to say that they were blown away. Despite being more than 10 years until the Games, more than 80% of our venues are already built and in use in our communities already. For example, committee members were able to visit the Gold Coast Sports and Leisure Centre, where local schools filled basketball courts. In the same complex, our very own Logan Martin was able to demonstrate why he is the world's first gold medalist for freestyle BMX. Yeah. And Mr Speaker, 9-year-old Kobe Clayton was able to show why we stand a good chance to repeat Logan's success in 2032. Yeah. Giving Queensland families the opportunity to watch their children compete in an Olympic and Paralympic Games on home soil will be one of our proudest achievements. Mr Speaker, we start making that dream come true as of now. Starting Friday in Toowoomba, we begin the biggest talent search this country has ever seen. Yeah. Today's Queensland children are tomorrow's Olympians, and the U for 2032 program gets them on their way. Yeah. We aim to test 20,000 young Queenslanders and find and train our Olympic and Paralympic hopefuls for tomorrow. Yeah. Last week, the Sports Minister opened a new $2.7 million National Throw Centre of Excellence for sports like discus and javelin. We have doubled funding to the Queensland Academy of Sport. We have located a site for the International Broadcast Centre, which will be built where the Visy glass factory is at South Brisbane. Last month, we announced a historic deal between our government and Visy to purchase the site for the Games. And in return, Visy will invest $700 million in Queensland, the largest investment the company has ever made in this state. Yeah. Mr Speaker, this deal secures 550 ongoing jobs at 3 locations for the next decade, including building a new $500 million glass factory at Stapleton, building a new $150 million cardboard box factory at Hammond, and $48 million to upgrades at material recovery facility at Gibson Island. Yeah. These projects in total will also create 900 construction jobs. Mr Speaker, the Organising Committee for the Olympic Games under the presidency of Andrew Liveris has met and has begun the countdown to 2032. We're well on our way. And as the IOC President Thomas Bach said, the only sad thing in our Olympics is that we have to wait 10 years to see them. And Mr Speaker, we can't wait for 2032. Yeah. Mr Speaker, last year thousands of women marched through our streets here and around the country demanding to be heard. The March for Justice had many goals, but none more emphatic that we listen to women, particularly their experience of domestic, family and sexual violence, because it is women and children who suffer most from these crimes. Mr Speaker, I am proud to say that our government is listening. And today I can announce historic and wide-reaching reforms to help address this issue. Mr Speaker, our government will make coercive control a crime. Coercive control is telling a woman what she can wear, where she can go, who she can see and what she can spend. Mr Speaker, it is the most common factor that leads to an intimate partner murder. It was what Hannah Clark suffered before she and her 3 children were so brutally killed. Mr Speaker, the $363 million package I announced today will provide programs to recognise and prevent it, as well as the laws that will punish its perpetrators. This was the key recommendation of Justice McMurdo's Women's Safety and Justice Task Force. Her report was titled simply and accurately, Hear Her Voice. It received more than 700 submissions from women and their lived experience of domestic and family violence. As a result of those submissions, we will also conduct a commission of inquiry into police practices investigating reports of domestic and family violence. Mr Speaker, let me make this very clear. Our police service does an exemplary job. Countless lives have been saved because of the men and women in our police service. But many survivors report at their particular point in time. Mr Speaker, this 4-month inquiry will recommend improvements. In addition, the police service will trial a collaborative co-response model involving police and specialist domestic and family violence services working together in a number of locations. A key focus will be recognising coercive control and a pattern of behaviours over time. Mr Speaker, we will dedicate $106 million to improving safety for victims attending court. Mr Speaker, we will expand specialist domestic violence courts. There will be more support for victims and a special strategy for First Nation communities. Above all, Mr Speaker, we will hear her voice. Mr Speaker, it is fitting these reforms occur in Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Month. None of these actions are our government's first to address this hideous crime, and this will not be the last. Next month we'll receive the second report of the task force examining the experience of women across our criminal justice system. I thank Judge McMurdo and the Attorney-General for all their hard work, diligence and dedication. Mr Speaker, I am inspired by the work of so many survivors, advocates and the families of the victims of these atrocious crimes. Such strength and such grace. And Mr Speaker, when I attended the vigil last week too, it's a very emotional vigil recognising the women that have lost their lives to domestic and family violence. And I want to thank all of those people who took the time to attend that, including many people, families, many people who support families during this time, especially support services, and also it was attended, Mr Speaker, by members of our police service as well, and I thank them for that. Mr Speaker, also today, some families are joining us in the public gallery. Far too many have carried this struggle for far too long, and I wanted to acknowledge, especially today, Vanessa Fowler, who was co-chair of the government's Domestic and Family Violence Task Force. As many would know, Vanessa is Alison Baden-Clay's sister. She is joined by her wonderful parents, Jeff and Priscilla Dickey. I'd also like to acknowledge Sue and Lloyd Clark, Hannah's parents. Their Small Steps for Hannah Foundation is dedicated to ensuring no other family suffers what they have gone through. They want to halt the cycle of domestic and family violence. H is for Hannah, A for Aliyah, L for Layana, and T for Trey. Those were the members of their family who were murdered by a man who was supposed to love them. Not one of us will solve the incidents of domestic and family violence. It's going to take all of us together.
I call the Attorney-General and Minister for Justice, Minister for Women and Minister for the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence.
Thank you, Speaker, and I am so pleased to join with the Premier today to announce our government's response to the landmark first report from the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force, Hear Her Voice. On the 2nd of December last year, the Task Force released its first report, Report 1, Addressing Coercive Control and Domestic and Family Violence in Queensland. The report makes 89 recommendations for reform to our criminal justice system, including the creation of a new offence to criminalise coercive control. The task force received more than 700 submissions from right across Queensland, and we have listened to every single one. And now is the time to take even further action to end all forms of domestic and family violence. Today's announcement of a $363 million reform package is historic. It will fundamentally change the system to be trauma-informed and place victim survivors at the forefront. The package is not just about new laws. It's about expanding specialist DV courts, increasing funding for perpetrator programs, increasing respectful relationships for all young people in Queensland, expanding our high-risk teams and funding co-responder models to ensure that victims receive a joint response from police and domestic violence services. We know that non-physical violence is just as dangerous as physical violence, and that coercive control is the biggest predicting factor for intimate partner homicide. Queensland women and children deserve to live free from the threat of violence without fear for their safety. We are committed to doing everything we possibly can to eliminate domestic and family violence in our state and ensure the tragic deaths of so many women have not been in vain. Can I acknowledge all of the hard-working frontline service workers and advocates that have joined us here today, as well as Hannah Clark's parents, Sue and Lloyd, Alison Baden-Clay's family, Vanessa, Jeff and Priscilla, Kelly Wilkinson's family and Danielle Carroll, and also the family of Doreen Langham and Mary Benedito. Thank you for your incredible advocacy, your incredible strength. Your work is making a real difference. The Palaszczuk government welcomes the Task Force report and is supporting the recommendations. These strong recommendations collectively provide a roadmap to the introduction to criminalise coercive control. In our government response, which I will now table, we agree with the recommendation of the Task Force to implement their recommendations in a four-phased approach to ensure that we are both reforming the criminal justice system and educating the community and training first responders. Laws will be amended, including modernising the offence of stalking, as well as changing the system's outdated current approach of responding to a single, usually physical incident of domestic violence, given what we know about the dangers of non-physical violence, and respond to patterns of controlling behaviour that happen over time. We said from the beginning that we are committed to legislating against this insidious form of abuse, and we want to make sure we get it right. We especially want to acknowledge the survivors in Queensland who shared their experiences with the Task Force. We know that sharing your stories is not an easy decision to make, but we are very grateful for your contribution, and it does make a difference. Thank you again to the Honourable Margaret McMurdo AC and all of the Task Force members for the critical work that you do. I look forward to continuing our work as we strive to eliminate domestic and family violence here in Queensland.
I call the Deputy Premier, Minister for State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning, and Minister assisting the Premier on the Olympic Games infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At the outset, can I acknowledge the work of the Premier and the Attorney on the Government's response to the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force. It is indeed important, and acknowledge those who join us in the gallery. The Palaszczuk Government is proud to partner with Visy, both on securing the land for the International Broadcast Centre for Brisbane 2032 and on a new recycling boon for Queensland, with Visy investing $700 million on expanding its recycling and remanufacturing operations across Queensland. Thanks to a $16 million investment from the Palaszczuk government, Visy will invest in major upgrades to the material recovery facility on Gibson Island. Upgrading the facility will not only create local jobs, but also increase recycling capacity to significantly reduce landfill. The works include a new state-of-the-art paper optical sorting plant that will be able to turn mixed paper picked up in curbside collections into 100% recycled paper, reducing landfill waste. Visy expects that this upgrade will see close to an additional 30,000 tonnes of material diverted from landfill each year. The upgrades to the Gibson Island facility will also create 11 jobs. Visy's investment also includes a new $500 million glass food and beverage container recycling and manufacturing facility in Yatala and a new $150 million corrugated box factory at Hammond. Now that we have secured the site for the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games International Broadcast Centre, we can support Visy to expand their operations around the state. Visy have pledged to invest $2 billion in Australian recycling and clean energy infrastructure over the next decade, creating thousands of new green-collar jobs, well-paying Australian manufacturing jobs. And we want as many of them as possible to be here in Queensland. Importantly, the IBC deal also protects the more than 200 manufacturing jobs associated with the glass factory, with the new glass manufacturing facility at Stapleton replacing the current facility at West End. And the 9-hectare IBC site offers wonderful legacy potential for after 2032. This deal and Visy's massive investment in Queensland jobs and Queensland's future is testament to business confidence in the direction this government is leading the state.
I call the Treasurer and Minister for Trade and Investment.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At the outset, I want to associate myself with the comments of the Premier and the Attorney-General in relation to the government's response to the Women's Justice and Safety Task Force report, an important investment by our government, the sorts of investment our government can make because of the strength of the Queensland economy and everything we've been able to do to recover from COVID-19. And I'm proud to be part of the government that is attacking the scourge of domestic and family violence wherever it appears, including in the City of Logan. Speaker, each week we see more evidence of the strength of Queensland's nation-leading economic recovery from COVID-19. Labour force figures from the Australian Bureau of Statistics for the month of March show that Queensland added 8,000 jobs in that month. That's more than any other state or territory. Those 8,000 jobs take the total number of Queensland jobs created across the 2 years of the pandemic to 160,700. That is also more than any other state or territory, and it is more than New South Wales and Victoria combined. Speaker, time and time again we see Queensland punching above its weight. Queensland business conditions and confidence, as measured by the NAB Business Survey, have rebounded from their pandemic depths 2 years ago. In the March quarter 2022, the National Australia Bank found Queensland business confidence was the second highest in the nation. It also found that Queensland business conditions led the national average. Speaker, Queensland has achieved these results because of the hard work and dedication of Queensland businesses and Queenslanders themselves. They did what had to be done to get us through the pandemic, and now we are reaping the rewards of the rebound. And we have done that despite the toxic twosome we have been relentlessly served up by Scott Morrison across those 2 years. Scott Morrison has comprehensively failed to deliver Queensland our fair share of funding for vital infrastructure and services.
Order. Members to my left.
At the same time, Speaker, Scott Morrison has taken every available opportunity to take cheap shots and denigrate our health response and our strong borders. Speaker, the LNP may laugh, but almost every week during the pandemic we face condemnation from Scott Morrison and the federal coalition because of our strong health response. Speaker, and it is precisely because of our strong health response we now lead the nation when it comes to economic recovery. Speaker, Queensland's economic strength has been achieved despite Scott Morrison and the LNP, not because of them. Imagine what we would be able to do as a state, what we would be able to achieve with a supportive, consultative, constructive Albanese Labor government in Canberra. working with Queensland, Speaker.
Order!
Labor government, working with Queensland and not against us.
Member for Clayfield.
And I'm the Treasurer.
Member for.
How'd that work out for you?
Member for Clayfield, you're warned under standing orders. Treasurer, you're warned under standing orders. Let me remind members that ministerial statements should not be party political. They should also be very much about matters of public interest. And I wish to reiterate that for all ministers. I call the Minister for Education.
Thank you, Speaker. And can I join the Premier and Attorney-General in welcoming the report and actions to stem domestic and family violence in the state. Today marks the start of NAPLAN testing period for 2022. Over the next 2 weeks, up to 300,000 students in almost 1,800 schools across the state will sit the annual National Literacy and Numeracy Test for years 3, 5, 7 and 9. And I take this opportunity to wish all participating students the best of luck, especially our Year 3 students doing NAPLAN for the first time.
And I too would like to wish all the ones sitting for that NAPLAN all the very best. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there in interest of time. So this has been a presentation of Australian Indian Radio. So today we had the daily news, and of course then we joined into our daily India report and the beginning part of the Parliament sitting of Queensland Parliament. Later on they will go into question time, which is quite lively as well. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, I'd like to thank you all for joining in. It's always so good to have your company. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.